Hello everyone, welcome to your next lecture. Today we are going to finalize our if, else, and elif logic condition. We're going to include the last statement that you can include for an if statement to make it basically as complicated as possible, or at least as able to be flexible and changed to many different operations or possibilities that you can make your code nice and dynamic and run different things. The one thing we are going to add on top of this lecture is I'm going to teach you about a new type of operator called logic operators. These are ways to add more nuance to your condition statements. Essentially, it allows you to chain conditions together so that you have multiple requirements in order for your if statements or elif statements to return a true or false response. So this stuff is really important because it really finishes up what if statements are, how you can make complicated logic, as well as how you can include multiple pieces of logic to make a really complex statement. So what you're going to learn today is you're going to learn kind of like advanced strategies for building an if, elif, and else logical statement. So we're going to specifically look at the elif statement, and we're going to look at a couple of logic operators to make our conditions more complex and dynamic. It's effectively infinitely complex or dynamic. So first off, an elif statement is a second or higher if command that will run code only if that elif statement returns true. If an if statement above it returns true first, it will ignore the subsequent elif statements. So you have to make sure that your logic can't have multiple positives or multiple trues across if and elif statements in order for it to catch properly. Lastly, I'm going to teach you about the and or operators, which allow you to chain conditions together. That's basically what they are, and or. That's how you write them. So with that in mind, guys, we're going to move into our syntax and see how all this works. Okay, so what you see here, first and foremost, I've just initialized two variables, x and y, so that we can do some sort of conditional comparison. And I've set up two if, elif, and else statements. The first one here is using just single conditions. So as you see here, the syntax for an if statement is you write the word if, you then give it a condition that needs to return true in order for the subsequent code to run. And once we have completed all of our conditions, we make sure that there's a colon at the end of it, and that tells Python that this if statement is complete. Next, for all the code that we want to run according to this if statement, everything needs to be indented. So in this case, we're saying if y is greater than x, we want it to print the word greater. Elif statements work exactly like if statements, except you can't have them at the beginning, but every other if statement that you want to have running in this code will be elif, and you can have multiple. So in this case, we're just using one. So we're saying if y is greater than x, print greater. In this case, it's not, so this code won't run. This block won't run. So then we go elif, what if y equals x? Which in this case also returns true. Remember, this is our equals to logical comparison operator. And because this one is false and this one is false, what happens is our else statement returns as true because all other if statements are false in this case. So we would expect in this one for our if statement to return the word none. Like that. Okay? So, and also notice that this is indented as well. So all of these if statements, when they have special code to run, are indented, and that's what makes Python really unique. Okay, so we're going to run through another example of if and else statements, except we're going to use conditional logic operators on top of this. So you can kind of separate each of these pieces of logic with parentheses in Python as well. This kind of like assures that these things are evaluated separately. But in this case, what we're saying is if y is less than x, which is true in this case, and x is greater than 35, which is also true, Because both of these statements return true, this if statement will also return true. Because what and does is it says, in order for this condition, this entire condition, to return as true, each individual condition must be true as well. That's what and is doing, okay? Well, now in our next loop, or our next Elif statement, we have if y is greater than x, which is not true, or y is less than 18, which is also not true, this won't print at all. Now, let's just say this was in fact greater than 18. What happens here? So in an or statement, you don't need all conditions in order to return as true in order for the entire statement to be true. You just need one of them. So if this was less than 8 or greater than 18, and this was, let's say, like, I don't know, does not equal, this statement would return as true, and you would get the or return true command. So remember that an and requires that both conditional statements must be true in order for it to pass through. An or statement only requires that one, or at least one of the statements be returned as true. And that makes sense just because of the language and how it's represented in English. Lastly, we have an else statement here. So if both of these were, if this had one x and this had both false, this final else statement would then produce none. So let's now hop into Python and see how this all works out. So as you see here, I'm in terminal. I'm in bash at the moment, so I'm going to call Python. We have Python here. Oops. Here's our Python. And what we're going to do is we're going to assign some variables. 40 equals y, or x, and 20 equals y. And we're going to play with some of our if statements here. So if x is greater than y, print greater, elif, let's do y less than x, see what happens here, print lesser, oops, that should error, we'll see what, oh, it didn't error because I fixed it. Okay, let's just clean that up a little bit. I shouldn't have pressed enter there, guys. So I'm just going to rerun this code. Elif there, print lesser, we'll wrap that up, and then else. Oops, can't believe I did that. I just pressed enter twice, guys. No worries, easy to fix. All right here. There we go. Else, print none. So what do we expect to happen here? It prints greater. Why does it print greater? Well, this is true, and this one's also true. It prints greater because if it goes by like each if statement in order. So if it passes one of them, then it's going to ignore all the others and go through it. So you either A, want to make sure that your if statements are ordered in a way that you'll want it to render properly, or B, you make sure that your if statements can't possibly be true for both of them, or for any of them except for one. And that's a really important logic to consider when building these kind of things. So let's now try this with our logic operators. If x is greater than y and x is greater than 30, let's just do this one here, print yes. It does print yes. So now let's try this with or and less than 30. Let's do less than 30 now. Will this print yes if it works? It does. Why? Because an or statement only needs one of the conditions to render true in order for it to work, whereas an and needs both of them. Let's try that and again, but we'll, make something false. That's false. And then we'll print yes again, and it doesn't do anything. You see that there? So with logic operators, you can chain conditional statements together and make them, have multiple checks or, specific checks that are one or the other. And this makes your code extremely dynamic and flexible and useful for all kinds of different possibilities for the types of information that are going to be coming into your code. So it's a very, very powerful tool. With that said, guys, why don't we do a recap? Why is this such a powerful tool? Because by the time you commit or you start to learn about for loops and start to combine if statements with for loops, you start to see the power of automation as well alongside the power of kind of simple logic guiding your processes. So what did we learn today, guys? We learned about logic operators. So we learned about and or. We learned about how elif works and did some advanced logic conditionals to show you how complicated your if statements can be. In our next chapter, we're going to be talking about what I alluded to just a second ago, which is we're going to deal with for loops and different types of loops. We're going to also look at different data types called lists and dictionaries. And this next chapter is really where automation starts to become really apparent in Python, where you can start to do millions of operations super quickly that you'd never be able to do by hand by yourself. So when you combine this information, this looping stuff, with what we learn with if statements, you're going to start to see the power of Python and why it's so popular within data science. All right, guys, thank you very much and catch you in the next lecture.